After our divorce, my mom still invited him to family dinners. I knew something was off the night my mom served him his favorite dessert. It was the first time we'd all been in the same room since the divorce. I didn't even want to come, but she insisted. Said it would be civil, mature, and good for everyone to stay connected. I didn't know how lemon pie had anything to do with maturity, but there it was, placed right in front of him, topped with whipped cream just the way he liked it. She hadn't made that pie in years. Not even for me. He smiled when he saw it. Wow. You remembered. My mom laughed softly. Of course I did. I looked at her, trying to read her face. There was nothing, just her usual pleasant, detached expression, the same one she used at church when someone she didn't like tried to hug her. I sat across from them, watching the quiet exchange like a stranger in my own family. This was the same man who called me manipulative during court. The man who ghosted me for 4 days after our 5th anniversary, then blamed me for being too emotional when I cried about it. The man who said, in front of a mediator, that marrying me felt like a decision made under pressure. And my mom made him pie. After dinner, she sent me home with leftovers and a cheerful kiss on the cheek. I drove away numb, trying not to overthink it. But the feeling wouldn't leave. A twist in my stomach. A buzzing in the back of my head. Something wasn't right. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed holding a forkful of that same lemon pie and stared at it like it held answers. I wanted to believe my mom just missed the version of him she liked. The charming, helpful, put-together version. The one he showed everyone else while I was drowning in his silence behind closed doors. But something about her tone. The comfort between them. The way they looked at each other like nothing had changed. I started remembering things differently. Like the time she defended him when I said he had stopped coming home before midnight. Or when she told me I was being too hard on him because marriage is difficult and men have limits. Back then, I brushed it off as generational stuff. My mom wasn't the warmest, but she meant well. At least, I thought she did. The turning point came 2 weeks later when she asked me to come help her clean out the attic. She was sorting through old boxes for her upcoming move. I didn't want to, but guilt won. I always said yes when it came to her. We were clearing shelves when I found a faded shoebox under a pile of blankets. Taped shut, labeled in her handwriting, cards. I opened it, expecting birthday notes or Christmas letters. Instead, I found emails. Printed out ones. Dozens of them. The headers were unmistakable. My ex-husband's name. Dates going back years. I saw one from 6 months before our divorce. Then another from the year we got married. Some were short. Some were long. Some looked like responses to things I'd said during arguments. And all of them were written to my mother. I sat there frozen, a page half folded in my lap, as she kept talking about boxes like nothing was wrong. Didn't say anything at first. I slid the lid back over the box and kept helping her move dusty bins from one side of the attic to the other. My mind was spinning, but my face stayed calm. It always had to. That's what she raised me to do. Hold it together, keep the peace, smile through confusion. But that night, I took the box with me. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. Back in my apartment, I dumped the letters and printouts across the floor. They weren't all from my ex. Some were from her to him. They talked about me like I was a case study, a problem to be solved. My flaws, my outbursts, my inability to let things go. She called me intense. Emotional. She said I had a way of making everything about myself. In one message, he told her I had been pressuring him to go to therapy with me. She replied, "You don't owe her that if she won't even admit her part." That one made my throat close up. They had built a private alliance, a conversation about my marriage where I was never invited. They weren't just exchanging updates, they were feeding each other's narratives, confirming each other's suspicions. The emotional weight I carried for years suddenly made sense. I hadn't been paranoid. I hadn't been difficult. I had been outnumbered. There was even a message from her just 2 weeks before we separated. She wrote, "Maybe it's time to start thinking about what you really want. You don't have to stay out of guilt." I stared at those words until the letters blurred. She had encouraged him to leave. Not directly, not forcefully, but in a way that gave him permission. The kind of permission a daughter should never imagine coming from her own mother. I sat on the floor for hours, surrounded by the mess of paper and pain, until the sun came up. Then I stuffed the emails into a new folder and tucked them away. I didn't know what I was going to do. All I knew was that I couldn't unsee it. The next time she called, I let it ring. The time after that, I answered. She wanted to know if I could pick up a few things for her from the store. I told her I was busy. She didn't ask why. I spent the next few days trying to figure out what to say. How do you confront someone who should have protected you? Who should have seen you as the one to stand beside, not question from a distance? I rehearsed the conversation in my head, over and over. But every version ended the same, with her denying it or turning it around on me. She always had a way of doing that. Eventually, I realized what I needed wasn't her explanation. It was her honesty. But I wasn't convinced she had any left. So instead of calling, I showed up. I walked into her kitchen one afternoon, dropped the folder on her counter, and sat down. She picked it up slowly, flipping through the pages, her face tight and unreadable. "You kept these?" she asked. "No," I said. "You did." She didn't respond. Just looked down at her own handwriting like it belonged to someone else. Then she whispered, "I was only trying to help. I was only trying to help." That was the first thing she said after reading through half the emails. Not sorry. Not I shouldn't have. Just that. Like she had done me a favor. Like meddling in my marriage, doubting me behind my back, and encouraging my husband to leave was somehow an act of support. I didn't respond right away. I let the words hang there between us. I watched her pretend to study the papers again, even though I knew she had already read them years ago. "What exactly were you trying to help with?" I finally asked. She set the folder down. I didn't mean for it to go as far as it did. I just thought, he needed someone to talk to. "He had me," I said. She sighed. "You two were always fighting. I thought if I could calm him down, maybe I could help you both. By telling him to think about what he really wanted? By calling me intense? By validating everything he said about me when I wasn't there to defend myself?" She winced. "That's not how I meant it. But that's what you said." She rubbed her temples like the conversation was exhausting her. Like I was dragging her into something messy when all she had tried to do was keep things neat. That was her thing, keep the surface clean, even if everything underneath was rotting. "I was scared for you," she said softly. "You were changing. You stopped smiling. You were becoming someone else." I stared at her. "That's what depression does, Mom. That's what happens when you're being emotionally abandoned by the person you married." She didn't answer. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet. A jogger passed by, a woman pushing a stroller behind him. Just life happening, while mine had been unraveling in ways I never fully saw until now. "I needed you," I said, still looking out. "I needed you to be on my side. Not blindly. Not unconditionally. Just present. Just honest with me. Not with him. I didn't think it would hurt you this way. That's the problem. You didn't think about me at all." I turned around, and for the first time in years, I saw tears in her eyes. Real ones. But I didn't move toward her. I didn't comfort her. I let her sit in the space she created between us. "Are you still in contact with him?" I asked. She hesitated. That was my answer. "Do you love him?" I pushed. Her face tightened. No. Of course not. Then why did it feel like you chose him? She didn't speak. I gathered the folder and walked to the door. I'm not going to tell anyone about this. Not Dad. Not my siblings. But I needed you to know that I know. And that this, whatever bond you thought you were forming with him, it broke something in me. Wait, she said, her voice thin. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I do love you, she said. I nodded once, but didn't turn around. I know. Then I left. And this time, I didn't cry on the way home. I didn't hear from her for a week. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a passive-aggressive comment through one of my aunts. That in itself was rare. Silence had never been her language. She preferred hints, sighs, the weaponized "I'm fine" that followed every uncomfortable moment. But this was different. This was real. I spent the week in a strange limbo. I wasn't sad. Not yet. I was still angry. But more than that, I was disappointed in myself for not seeing it sooner. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. Her constant deflection when I needed support. The way she always gave Aaron the benefit of the doubt, even when I brought up things that should have alarmed any mother. I remember once, I told her he hadn't come home for 2 nights. She looked up from her tea and said, "Well, have you been nagging him lately?" It was always like that. If something went wrong, it must have been something I did. Something I said. Something I failed to manage. I was so used to her measuring my emotions like they were too loud, too inconvenient, too much. The truth was, she had never really seen me. Not the real me. Only the version she could control. A few days later, I got a package. No return address. Just my name in her handwriting. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. 4 pages long. She started with what sounded like an apology. But it quickly turned into justification. She wrote about how hard it was watching me struggle. How she didn't know how to help without making things worse. How Aaron confided in her when he was overwhelmed. How it felt good to be needed by someone who wasn't constantly pushing her away. She actually wrote that. That she felt closer to him because he appreciated her. I stared at that line for a long time. I realized then that it wasn't just about me or Aaron. It was about her need to be wanted. To feel relevant. She had used my crumbling marriage as a way to feel valuable again, and somehow convinced herself that it was all for my benefit. At the bottom of the last page, she wrote, "Maybe one day you'll understand that I was trying to keep our family from falling apart." I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't respond. What she didn't understand was that the family had already fallen apart, and not because of me. I talked to my therapist about it the next day. She asked me something I hadn't considered. Do you want to repair things with your mom? Or do you feel obligated to? That question hit me harder than anything else. I sat in silence for a while before answering. I think I've spent my whole life confusing the two. And maybe that was the real betrayal. Not just what happened with Aaron, but all the years of shrinking myself just to keep her comfortable. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to write her back. I wasn't going to send a dramatic message or start a family war. I wasn't even going to tell anyone else what I'd found. Instead, I was going to protect my peace the same way she protected her illusions, quietly, with boundaries. For once, I would choose myself. I started to understand peace in ways I hadn't before. Not the kind that comes from everyone getting along. Not the forced smiles at dinner or the quick texts that say, "Love you," even when they sting. Real peace. The kind that comes from knowing you're not pretending anymore. From knowing you've stopped handing out access to people who used it against you. My apartment started to feel warmer. I lit candles in the evenings, played music while cooking, took long walks without checking my phone every few minutes. I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. Not my mom's, not Erin's. That silence I used to dread started to sound a lot like freedom. And then one morning, I got a call. It was my brother, Thomas. "Have you talked to Mom?" he asked. I hesitated. "Not lately." "Why?" "She's acting strange. Snapping at everyone. She canceled dinner with Aunt Carla, said she's been under stress." "Did something happen?" I thought about lying. About brushing it off. But then I realized I was done protecting her version of the story. "She and I had a talk," I said. "About the divorce. About her relationship with Erin." There was a pause. "What kind of relationship?" I told him. Not everything, but enough. Enough for him to understand why I'd been distant. Why I hadn't come to family brunch last Sunday. Why I hadn't returned her letter. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She always treated him like the son she never had." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was painfully true. My mom always had this soft spot for people who made her feel important. Erin played that part well. He knew how to charm her, to confide in her just enough to seem sincere. I used to think it was harmless. Now I saw it for what it really was, manipulation. And she welcomed it. "She crossed a line," I said. "I believe you," he replied. "And I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened." It was the first time someone from my family actually said that out loud. It didn't fix anything, but it mattered. It reminded me that I wasn't alone in this. We talked for a while longer. When we hung up, I didn't feel drained. I felt lighter. A few days later, I got another letter from my mom. Shorter this time. She said she was sorry for how she handled things, and that she understood if I needed space. That was it. No explanations. No defensiveness. Just those few sentences. I didn't write back. I didn't need her to say anything else. I had already said what I needed to, by walking away, by choosing not to carry her guilt as my own, by deciding not to explain myself over and over just to be heard. I think part of me still loved her. That kind of love doesn't disappear overnight. But it changed. It became something quieter, something boundaried. Love without access. Love with conditions. And I had to accept that some relationships only survive if you stop feeding them your pain. For now, I was learning how to live without the constant ache of trying to be understood. And that, for the first time in a long time, felt like a kind of joy. Weeks passed, and life kept moving. It amazed me how something so heavy could become background noise. The kind that's still there, still humming, but no longer controls the rhythm of your days. I saw Erin once. Just once. At the grocery store. He didn't notice me at first. He was by the produce section, holding a bundle of spinach and talking on the phone. Smiling. Easy. Like nothing had ever happened. Like he hadn't wrecked my life and built part of it on shared lies with my own mother. For a second, I froze. My stomach clenched, and I felt the familiar rush of heat crawl up my neck. But then something surprising happened. I didn't walk away. I didn't rush down another aisle or pretend to be deeply interested in cereal. I stood still and watched him for a moment. He looked older. Not tired. Not worn out. Just like a man who had lived long enough with his own choices to forget the weight of them. He turned his head, saw me, and the smile dropped. He paused, clearly unsure if he should speak or walk away. I gave him nothing. No wave. No scowl. No reaction. I just turned and walked toward the checkout line like he was anyone else. And for the first time since everything happened, I realized he was. I got home, dropped the groceries on the counter, and sat with that moment. I wasn't proud or smug. I was just done. Whatever grip he once had on me, it was gone. I didn't need closure from him. I didn't need revenge. That silence between us in the store said more than anything we could have exchanged. Later that week, I called my therapist and told her about it. "You didn't react," she said. "Nope." "How did that feel?" I thought about it. Like I finally closed the door without slamming it. It was strange. I had spent so much time angry, grieving, trying to understand. And now that it had settled, now that the storm had passed, all I wanted was quiet. Not the quiet that comes from avoiding conflict. The kind that comes from peace. Real peace. I still hadn't seen my mom. I knew she was giving me space. I also knew she hoped I'd reach out eventually. The old me probably would have. The version of myself that believed keeping the family together was more important than holding anyone accountable. But I wasn't her anymore. I didn't hate her. I didn't even want to cut her off entirely. I just needed her to understand that love didn't mean ignoring pain. That forgiveness, if it ever came, wasn't owed. It had to be earned. And she had never really tried to earn it. She sent letters. She let time pass. But she never sat in the discomfort of what she did. One afternoon, my brother called again. "She's been asking about you," he said. I figured. She's not doing great. I didn't ask for details. "Do you want me to tell her anything?" I thought about it. Then I said, "Tell her I'm healing. And that I'm not ready." That was the truth. I was healing. Not healed. Not whole. But getting there. And I wasn't going to rush it just because someone else felt uncomfortable with the timeline. Some people don't get a front row seat to your recovery. Not after they helped cause the damage. Fall came fast that year. The trees outside my window turned deep shades of copper and blood. It felt like even the world outside was learning to let go. I found myself falling into new routines. Quiet mornings with tea instead of coffee. Soft music in the evenings. Candles lit by habit, not mood. Life felt gentler, but heavier too. A kind of soft ache under the peace. Then, a week before Thanksgiving, I got a text. "We're having dinner at 5 if you want to come." That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just that one sentence, written plainly by my mom. I stared at it for almost 10 minutes. A few months ago, I would have gone without a second thought. I would have smiled through the awkward glances, the small talk, the forced laughter. But now? I wasn't sure. It wasn't just about her betrayal anymore. It was about how deeply I had neglected myself just to keep her comfortable. Still, I didn't delete the message. Later that day, I called my brother. "She invited me," I said. "Are you going?" he asked. "I don't know." He was quiet for a few seconds. "You don't owe her anything. But if you do come, I'll be there. I won't let her pretend everything's fine unless that's what you want." I thanked him and said I'd think about it. The day came faster than I expected. When I pulled into her driveway, I still hadn't fully decided what to say or how long I'd stay. I just knew that I needed to see her face again and not feel like a ghost in my own story. Inside, everything was the same. The familiar smell of cinnamon and baked apples. The same fall wreath on the door. My dad was in the den with a football game humming in the background. A couple of cousins hovered in the kitchen, sneaking bites of dessert. And then she walked in. My mother. She saw me, paused, then smiled. "Hi, sweetheart." I returned the smile, guarded. "Hi." We hugged. It was stiff. Not cold, but distant. Like we both remembered how to do it, but had forgotten how it used to feel. Dinner was typical. Pleasant. Too pleasant. She kept the conversation light. She asked about my job, about the new plant in my living room, even complimented the color of my nails. But she never brought up Aaron. Not once. That silence said more than words. After dessert, I went to the kitchen to help clean up. She followed. "I'm glad you came," she said, drying a plate beside me. I nodded without looking at her. "I've been thinking about what you said," she added. "About how I made you feel." I turned toward her, bracing myself. "I can't undo it. I wish I could. But I want to understand better. I don't want to lose you." It wasn't an apology. Not fully. But it was the first time she admitted she might have done something wrong. "I don't know what to say yet," I told her. "You don't have to," she replied. "Just, let me know when you're ready." We stood there in silence, the sink still running, the noise of family echoing from the other room. I didn't reach out. She didn't either. But in that moment, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight alone. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. I left her house that night unsure of what came next. We didn't have a deep conversation. We didn't unpack every letter, every betrayal, every moment she stood with him instead of me. But for the first time, she didn't act like nothing had happened. She didn't hide behind baked goods and polite smiles. She looked me in the eye and admitted there was something broken between us. That was new. That was something. I drove home in silence. No music. No calls. Just me and my thoughts. I wasn't sure if I wanted to rebuild anything with her. Trust wasn't a switch I could flip just because someone showed up with good intentions. It was something earned slowly, if at all. But I did feel something I hadn't in a long time. Relief. Maybe because I finally said what I needed to. Maybe because I stopped needing her to understand in order to move forward. The days that followed felt clearer. I didn't feel as weighed down. I still had questions. Still felt that ache when I remembered how easily she handed over pieces of me to a man who destroyed our marriage. But I also had new boundaries. And for the first time, I stuck to them. A few weeks later, she sent one more message. "Thinking of you. No pressure. Just here when you're ready." I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Not to punish her. I just didn't feel ready. And I was allowed to not be ready. Healing wasn't linear. Some days I felt strong. Other days, I still wanted answers. But every day I woke up choosing myself over the version of me who always smiled to make others feel better. That was a start. I stopped looking at old wedding photos. I stopped rereading her letters. I put the emails in a box and shoved it to the back of my closet. I didn't need them to remind me of what had happened. I remembered just fine. But I no longer needed proof to justify my pain. Sometimes people hurt you in ways they will never fully understand. And sometimes they apologize without ever really seeing what they did. But that doesn't mean your story ends in silence. It doesn't mean you owe them access to your healing. The truth is, I lost 2 people in one divorce. One by choice. One by disappointment. But I found someone too. I found myself. The version of me who doesn't keep quiet just to keep the peace. The version who doesn't beg to be believed. The one who walks away when trust has been broken, even if it's family. And maybe that's what closure really is. Not forgiveness wrapped in a perfect moment, but the quiet knowing that you're finally free from needing anything more.